What's up, everyone? This is Abdul here from FalConNotes, and I'm here to share with you one of our Notion templates that we've just released. This is the Personal Medical Library, and essentially, I'll walk through what it is in a second. But one of the things that we often find ourselves doing in medicine, whether you're in your clerkship years or your residency and beyond, is that we're always learning, and we need a way to document what we learn. And many people have like different setups, but we want to introduce a Notion template that helps you facilitate that process. So the benefit of Notion and having a digital library is, one, you can access it quickly, you can access it often, and you can access it on the go, which is kind of how we need accessibility as physicians. And one of the things we learn throughout med school and beyond is that we learn best when we document it ourselves. So this template is actually a blank template. You'll see that some of it is filled out based on how I've been using it, but essentially the one that we will offer will be blank so that you can kind of fill it in yourself as you learn, as you go through your medical career. So now the question is, what is a personal medical library, right? So you've heard of AMBOSS, you've heard of UpToDate, you've heard of you can do CMEs while you're in residency and beyond, and you can talk to specialists and stuff. And so you have all these information sources when it comes to learning about how to manage certain diseases in certain patients. And so you want to be able to create a database so that you can reference quickly in case you need to, so that you know you can document what you've learned essentially. And so what this personal medical library is basically a personalized version of AMBOSS, or a personalized UpToDate, or a personalized stat pearls, for example. And essentially Notion is a really good platform for that, because Notion is an all-in-one product. So if you think of Evernote, OneNote, Google Docs, some of those can get disorganized. Some of them you might run out of space, but as long as you have an education account on Notion, you can use the unlimited access and build out your library here. So let me walk through our template right now. It has some of it populated so you can kind of see. So right off the bat, you see it's a one pager. At the top, you have a knowledge inbox, which I'll get to later. And then at the bottom, you have all of your specialties. Now, I'm in internal medicine, so we kind of have to know a lot about every different specialty. So this is mostly useful for internal medicine, but it can also be adapted to other specialties. Family medicine can use this as well. But if you are, for example, orthopedics, you can have more orthopedic specific related topics. Or if you're OBGYN, you can have gyne and pediatrics and so on and so forth. So in my situation, we kind of have to know a little bit about a lot of different things. And so I'll walk you through the first one, right? So one of the first things, let's say, for example, if you click on hematology oncology, I have a little note here about anemia and how to work up anemia. And so you click on anemia, and then it'll show you a little bit about anemia. And this is all written by me. Causes of microcytic anemia, and this is based on some CME that I've done. Causes of normocytic anemia. Actually, this was based on a lecture by a fellow. And then causes of macrocytic anemia. So you can kind of see just brief overview written in my own notes, so I know what I'm talking about, and I know how I speak and how I learn, so I phrase things the way I like to. So this is the section on anemia. Now, if I go back, I can click on cardiology. I have a bunch of topics written out in cardiology, for example. Hypertension outpatient, terms start with which medication, some doses, goals, and then testing for comorbid conditions and organ damage when you have uncontrolled hypertension. So it's a very brief, very quickly accessible thing. Now you'll notice that all of these databases within each subject are actually linked databases. What that means is that they're all based on one big master database, which I'll scroll down to all the way at the bottom here. This is the master disease database. So any information that I write down in my Notion is going to come into this database for the most part. And then I have specialties or tags along with each note, so that once I tag it with a specific specialty, for example, geriatrics, it'll go into the geriatrics section, or it'll go into the hematology oncology section. So, for example, in gastroenterology, I have a quick section on C. diff. Essentially, what it is most common causes and treatment. So pretty basic stuff, but it has this tag. So not only is it in the master database, it's also under gastroenterology. Now, let's say the reason there's also a filter of what I've created called approach to. So this is not specific diseases, this is specific presentation. So if you scroll down here, what you see is approach to chief complaint. And so a patient might come in with AKI, anemia, chest pain. Notice that these are not diagnoses, but they are rather complaints or chief concerns, at which point you can kind of open up a specific chief concern to see how to manage it or how to work it up. So for example, with AKI, as many of you know, there's some definitions that we go by based on UpToDate, and a very general approach I have for each of the three types. But essentially, then I split it into pre-renal, post-renal, and intrarenal. As many of you know how we work up an AKI, we have to figure out which one it is. So for example, if the patient comes in with chest pain, these are the differential diagnoses for chest pain. And then at the bottom, I talk about cardiac chest pain. I learned about the Diamond Forrester classification, so I kind of write out what that means. And then what to do if you admit an ACS chest pain that's not a STEMI, so either NSTEMI or unstable angina. Some important information. This I got from OME, Online Med Ed. And then some further evaluations that you can do. For example, let's say you have a patient with abnormal LFTs, right? What are LFTs? Liver function tests. But did you know that they can be split into chronic synthetic function and acute hepatocellular injury? So this is stuff I learned from Online Med Ed as well. It gives me a brief overview of what to expect when certain things are elevated and what to consider. So this is my master database. And again, all of these are also in our master disease database, but they're filtered as approach to. And then the last thing is chalk talks, right? So as medical residents, as medical students, residents, and attendings, we have to also teach the future generation. So one of the filters that I have is called chalk talk. So meaning this is a topic that I just written about that I can give a chalk talk in 5 minutes or less. Something like MRSA risk factors. Very brief, you just review some of the most important MRSA risk factors, when to consider MRSA infection in a patient. What about quick EKG review, right? Let's say a learner doesn't know about EKGs. So I have an approach to EKGs that I use. Or let's say you want to learn about vent basics, definitions, vent settings, and so on and so forth. Or let's say you have a patient, med student that's first time to the ICU. What is an ICU and what are the indications for ICU across the different specialties? Fluid responsiveness. This is an ICU topic. How do you know if a patient is fluid responsive? You can give them fluids. You can do passive leg raise, etc. These are things that I learned along the way. Alternative dispose at discharge is another one, right? So once a patient is admitted to the hospital, they might not be going back to where they came from. They might need some additional support. So as you go through your medical school, as you go through education, wherever you are, you learn about all these different options that are available in your state, for example. And so this is a brief overview of the personal medical library. You'll see how most of it is based on this master disease database. When it's available on FALCONNOTES.com, it'll be blank so that you can kind of fill it in yourself, whether you gather information from specialists, whether you gather information from podcasts, UpToDate, AMBOSS, so on and so forth. So for example, actually, I just listened to a podcast that I really like. So what I'll do here is actually create a link to the podcast. So I can actually share this podcast copy link. So let's say the podcast episode was from Core IM and it was about pacemakers, right? So I can leave a section in cardiology for pacemakers and then paste a link to the podcast and create an embed code. And boom, right here I have a topic on pacemakers. And I can go into biventricular, dual chamber, et cetera, AICD, all that stuff. I can start writing notes based on this podcast episode. So this might not be a page by itself, or I can include it as a page, or I can include it in general cardiology. However I want to do it, it's all available for you guys to. The nice thing about Notion is that you can kind of do whatever you want with it, and however you want with it. So the basic template is there, split into the different specialties, primarily for internal medicine and family medicine, but obviously you can adapt it to your own residency, specialty, and beyond. And that's it. Hope you guys enjoy. This will be available on FALCONNOTES.com.